also if there is a lot of data, like we mentioned, Claude is definitely better in that area. Okay, so do we have a verdict? Which one of these tools is best?
It depends on, for small businesses, I still think, hi, welcome back to AI Revolution. Today, we're going to do something interesting. We're going to look at these new software, different part of our AI software is coming out. So we look at Bard, Google Bard, the offer from Google in terms of doing AI and maybe one of the rivals to Chat GPT. We're going to look at Chat GPT 4, which is obviously the latest version of Chat GPT and is coming from OpenAI. And finally, we're going to look at the new other rival called Claude 2. And basically, me and Tumo have been using all of these, and we're just going to discuss the sort of various differences. So you told me you were using Bard this morning. Can you tell us a bit about Bard and what was your impression of Bard?
Yeah, it's really good tool, and then I think it will be interesting to have this kind of comparison between Bard and ChatGPT and Claude, because I think those are the most kind of like popular tools right now, and everybody's talking about ChatGPT, but there's definitely competition coming. And Bard, just shortly for the audience, what is Bard? So it is the Google's counter-strike to the ChatGPT. So it is a product that Google made, and it's just actually recently made available, well, pretty much all over the world, I think. I'm not sure how many countries, but I think it's actually important to start from where these tools are available, because Bard is available in Europe and United States, and I think UK. I don't know if this situation might live because some of these tools gets banned from certain countries. But anyways, Bard is in pretty many countries, and ChatGPT also in pretty many countries. But I think Claude is only in UK and the United States. But anyways, yes, I was having a discussion with Bard, which is the Google product, and I was testing it out. It just recently came available here in Finland as well, and it seems like a good tool, and it seems like there is definitely like different pros and cons in Bard compared to ChatGPT, for example. Like I would say that definitely the biggest advantage in Bard is that it has up-to-date data. I ran a test actually right away when I logged into Bard. It gave me some example prompts, and it said like, okay, ask me to make a holiday trip to Dublin at summer. And it gave a really good summary. And this is actually interesting because just in our previous episode, we were talking about AI and travel and how AI can become a travel agency. So I can definitely see that coming, especially when this part has up-to-date information. And then I went to make a comparison. I went to make the same prompt into ChatGPT, and it said me, unfortunately, I don't have up-to-date information, so I cannot give this, but I can give you a general guidance. So, and it actually gave a general guidance that was pretty close to what Bard gave. But anyways, I would much rather use Bard because you do want to have up-to-date information when you're traveling. So, for example, I made another prompt just to test it out, and I gave to ChatGPT, is Ukraine a safe country to travel? And it said, well, I have information until 2021, but according to the current situation, it's relatively safe country to travel. and it's just like these basic kind of things like avoid going to bad areas or something like that. But when I went to Bard, it gave absolutely not. Don't go there in any way. There is a war going on in 2023, which is true. So it's a good example that Bard has up-to-date information from the internet, whereas ChatGPT has not. So that's definitely the big pro side of Bard compared to ChatGPT.
I also did the search now in Claude, and I'm afraid it had the same as ChatGPT. It came up with low crime rate, but nothing about at all about the war, etc. So yeah, it has the same issue.
Yeah.
I also tested Bard, but I tested Bard for things like image recognition and that sort of thing, because one good thing about both Bard and Claude is that you can feed in images. So I tested to feed images, and it did do fairly well, except that sometimes it got completely wrong context, and it started to sort of hallucinate and put in things in the images that wasn't really there, etc.
Yeah.
So I don't think it has really, in terms of image recognition, maybe perhaps Bard isn't Bard isn't possibly the best
Yeah.
to use yet.
I was actually checking some, comparison also about how the image recognition works in AI tools, and they didn't give very good numbers to any of these tools, but it was that also that some images, they were relatively good, but in terms of humans, recognizing human beings, it wasn't good at all, any of these tools. But what kind of experience, what kind of images did you run the test for?
Well, I did just as a normal kind of from a sort of town, like a bleak sort of city, but it came up with things like there are robots in the image, and it kind of invented things for the people. And I say it was particularly bad with people, or invented it was cowboys, and that clearly wasn't there. It could describe things like houses, but it was just not very good in terms of actually describing the image. Or the other thing I did was that I thought maybe in terms of application, maybe we could have Bard kind of explaining what the application is look like and what the pages look like. But instead of explaining the data, it would do something like, oh, there are 3 columns with data text. And so it would describe, instead of describing the actual application like Word, or not Word, but forms, for example, it wouldn't describe what the text was like that you can't anticipate. Instead, I would go in and say, yeah, this is a lovely picture. It has a table with 4
Yeah.
columns, and there's text in them, which is not as useful, because I sincerely thought that maybe we could use Bard for training people on software and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I think they need to change that.
Well, that's interesting. And I think these tools are developing all the time. I think the more advanced, like the text is definitely the easiest, then images, and I think videos are the toughest. But we have been talking about this previously also, that they are developing all the time. But definitely, like, the biggest pro in Bard compared to Claude and ChatGPT is that it has the information from internet. I have to say, however, that, I think ChatGPT 4 actually has this availability to install plugins that are actually connected to the browser. So, and I think the biggest benefit in ChatGPT in general compared to these other tools is that it has a lot of plugins that you can use with it that makes it even more powerful.
But I think the plugins are coming. I think they might become for both Bard and Claude. It's just because they are so new. But one thing that Bard is good at, and it's in terms of token limit, that, for example, where one thing was you can feed it in large amount of text, and it can summarize this. And this is similar to Claude, can do that as well. Claude has, though, a limit on about 4,000. It's about 70,000 words, something like that. Whereas Chat GPT, it's only like 4,000 words. So it's a huge difference. But it means that if you like have books that you want to summarize, you can feed them in both to Claude and Bard, and they are able to summarize the text.
So is there actually, I heard the same thing, that ChatGPT has really much smaller amount that it can scrape the data from. Claude has really big one, so it can basically like scrape data from the whole book and make a summarize of it, which is really amazing. So does Bard actually? I heard it has some limitations too, but is it? I think they have improved it, so it can also do for quite.
Yeah, it can do large text, and it's improving all the time. I heard that latest version has even a more better improved summarizing ability. And I mean, it was just amazing with Claude. So I had 4 books, sort of books about Instagram, and thought I don't have time to read these. So I basically fed them all into Claude, and it just summarized the books. It came up with, I mean, it didn't give me like as detailed summary, like as if you were reading a review, but you could get a really good idea about what these books were.
That's true. The reality is that when you read a book, after you have read a book of 200 or 300 words, you realize that, hey, I learned this one or two concepts and I spent many hours reading it. While if you give the summary, I don't say it's bad to read a book from cover to cover, but sometimes you really do want to read like a summary of a book. I also have had for a while this app from App Store. It's named Cobbler, which is like audiobooks in this kind of format, summarized version. But I think it's very good that we have these AI tools now that can do it for us.
I was actually a bit worried about that because I think there are quite a lot of companies that their whole business idea is to summarize books. And now when you can use both Claude and Bard and Chat GPT to do it, or this Claude and Bard at the moment, they might be out of business because they do so well in terms of summarize. And not only do they summarize, but you can also get them to proofread the text, like from a meeting. It can basically produce the whole text. If you feed it in, for example, the transcript, it can proofread it, it can rewrite it, and maybe sort of meaning that you might not need to attend meetings, or if you do attend that you weren't able to take the notes, you can actually basically get them. Particularly Claude can do this. It can, you can more or less proofread and rewrite the notes for you, which can save you a lot of time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's very true. And then in terms of how can you as a small entrepreneur maybe use these tools in a proactive way in what you do, maybe we want to give some examples. So so for sure everybody says like content creation. I think still the Chat GPT is a very good tool for that one, and there is some plugins and prompt libraries, and so that's one way.
So I do quite a lot of marketing for small businesses, and the way we use, for example, ChatGPT is like it can produce social media calendars, so it can tell you, where to promote your products, what kind of post to use, create the post themselves, when to post, and it can also, it's fabulous in terms of creating all of these social media content, like Facebook's ad, Twitter ad, etc. However, sometimes what it does fail is that it doesn't seem to realize the word limit. So like it produces very long Twitter ads. You have to sort of cut and paste, or you have to say, restrain yourself to 140 characters and that sort of thing. But it's fantastic in that sense.
And you can always say to it, okay, put this in less than 100 characters. But that's also where it comes that the plugins are very useful. So I'm checking right now this one tool called Chat ABC, which is kind of like, it combines those that you can actually place PDF files into Chat GPT, which is normally not available in Chat GPT. I think Claude and Bard is still better for that because they can scrape a lot bigger data. But then it also has like prompt library and things like this that you can, like automatically then, instead of making the prompt that make me a Facebook ad and it gives you a too long ad format, it automatically gives you, make me a compelling Facebook ad targeted to this audience and delivering to their pain points, and maybe you feel that, and then in less than 50 characters, and then it works even better.
Another thing where the software are fabulous is also in terms of code creation. So ChatGPT has something called Code Interpreter, which sort of produces code, and it can particularly do HTML and CSS code, which of course will again really make things easier for people in terms of creating web pages, etc. But it also can produce Python, I think, and some other languages. The same goes for Claude and Bard, but I think this sort of the ability is sort of varying degrees of sophistication for in terms of what it produce.
I must say that I was pretty impressed by Claude, how it worked as my SEO expert. And so maybe some people in this audience are building a website or something, and maybe they have a small business, maybe they build it there themselves, or maybe they just need to know some more about, like maybe you have a local business and you need to know about search engine optimization. So I have an example of this. So we have a local business with my wife. So like a day spa, people come there, and sometimes people search those kind of services from internet. And I've been like building a website with WordPress. And for a long time, there was like an issue that I was Googling around on how to search optimize your website. And I didn't want to pay these agencies, like thousands of dollars, like they usually charge for it. Or maybe you pay for some freelancer who you don't know about the quality after all. And then I started building this website because you need to structure the website correctly for it to be ranking in Google as good as possible. And I was pretty impressed by when I started having this conversation with Claude, because I used to be Googling around like, okay, how do I structure this WooCommerce site that has an e-commerce and a local site in the same website? How should I structure it in a correct way? So then when you go Google this sort of thing, you get these answers. Why SEO? Why the search engine optimization? And I come on now. I want this specific answer. And I must say in Google, this is many times the bad side of Google. When you're looking for specific answers, you rarely get them. You get these big general, and you need to read all these articles to find the one sentence. And when I went to Claude, it gave me no nonsense. It gave me the direct answer. And not only that, it gave me instructions that I didn't even ask it to give me. So it kind of has become my SEO, search engine optimization expert, that knows everything about search engine optimization and gives me no BS answers like happens with Googling around and watching YouTube videos and finding irrelevant information. So I must say that I love Claude in that way, and it did really.
But can it make you a cup of tea?
Almost, I think.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think in terms of saving money for small entrepreneurs, that's just it. You can use Claude and Bard and GPT as your social media manager, as your marketing expert, as your sales rep. And that's another area which I feel these software can be used in terms of responding to email. As a small business owner, even if you use an autoresponder, it's to respond to all these emails, to write the campaigns, and that's another area where it's really, really good. Like it can help you write really nice responses to emails, even when people are complaining of your services, and it can really help in that sort of thing, and suggesting what to write. The only issue that I'm coming into now is in terms of creativity, because there I think, having used ChatGPT for a long time, ChatGPT is very good with being creative and in responsive. Unfortunately, other software are not as good with this. How have you found this?
So you meant it's not as, can you repeat? You meant
in creative, in terms of coming up with things like interesting answers, interesting things to do. Like it's a bit the other Claude and Bard are more limited in that sense, but it could be. I wondered if it is because ChatGPT has been trained on all this data, and I don't know what sort of data Bard has been trained on, and unless it's the internet or Claude, but it just seems like in terms of coming up with more creative, interesting answers.
Yeah, actually, I think when it comes to like creative answers or even like writing poetry, I think ChatGPT is still way best. Like writing poetry, but in terms of like creative, what kind of creative answers would you mean in specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of writing like a poem, but also just in terms of when we suggest things, activities to do in social media. And I use it a lot for product description, for example, Etsy store, my Etsy store. Like, can you write a product? And there, I think ChatGPT has a slight edge in terms of coming up with interesting descriptions and that sort of thing. And I don't know why it is that Claude and Bard are not yet as good as this.
That's a good question. I do agree with you that in some levels ChatGPT seems to be a little bit ahead of this thing. Like you mentioned, this creative writing or something like that. For some reason, for maybe we don't never know it because they have at least they have some secrecy in how they make the tools work. But that's I certainly have the same kind of feeling that it's a little bit ahead in the creative writing. And what about when you actually asked about the coding, and you was talking about that, like AI making websites or something. What do you believe of these three tools is the best for coding?
I don't know, because Code Interpreter, I think, is pretty good in terms of actually creating codes. I mean, it was really surprising that initially they had a beta version of Chat GPT 4 where you could go on the internet. They took away that, and then they have this code interpreter now that can interpret code and write codes. And so far, it seems to do pretty well. And I mean, the code is working, etc. Where, because it means that, you can save enormously on things like, putting in developers to do things, or even, I was talking to someone yesterday, but it doesn't have to replace the developer. It can just give them more ideas, like, what to do. And in terms of also, well, or Claude is free, so and it can perhaps also test various solutions. That's what I thought it might be able to do. Maybe that'd be the next step, but that it can test various, when you write SQL script, for example, it can test different or compare them or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Things that in the past has been quite difficult to do.
Yeah. And I think I've also heard that this code interpreter is pretty good at coding. But one great thing actually also is that that a lot of these ChatGPT, like ChatGPT, is actually integratable to a lot of tools. So for example, I will give you an example, because like usually nowadays people make their websites with like tools like WordPress or Wix, or for coaches, consultants, there is this newer tool called High Level, which is pretty also popular. And all of these tools actually have AI tools installed inside of them. So for example, when you use WordPress, and if you install the plugin called Elementor, which is pretty popular to make your kind of like a drag and drop system builder inside your website, it now has a tool, and I was testing it, and it worked really well actually. So when you're building a website, and if you're not a coder, you do want to just have this simple drag and drop system. So you don't want to learn to code. It takes a lot of time or money to pay someone. So now you can code there, because CSS is the code that makes your website look good, and then you can go to make custom CSS code, and you write there that, okay, make this button blink when I place my mouse over it, and it gives you the code, and it happens actually in the website, and you can make all more complicated codes for it all the time. So this is right now, you can do it inside WordPress Elementor, and you can do, I haven't tested it yet in other tools, but at least in this WordPress, it's very powerful. And the difference between going inside ChatGPT and writing that code is that once it's inside the plugin, it actually reads the website that, okay, hey, it reads the context. Okay, this is a website about plumber. So, and then you ask it to write something like bullet points for plumbing. It gives a better answer than just trying to prompt it inside the tool, because it reads your whole website. And also, if you place code, it has a better understanding of what you are actually trying to give it, instead of logging in ChatGPT and giving it from there. So I think that's really powerful.
Another way, when you built your website, it's also, of course, about website optimization, or how to make it the best website possible. And what thing you could do is you can ask the software how you can make them better. And they have made sort of some tests, and one, I think Claude is extremely good at this. There's one good, it's sort of offering many explanation, looking at websites, so this and this can be helpful. In this example, Bard didn't give us about 3 distinct answer, but not sort of, it gave it more Google. It's funny, Google type answers.
I agree with you. I must agree with you. Yeah.
And again, ChatGPT came up with, ChatGPT always seems to get 10 bullet point, whatever you ask, it's 10 bullet point.
So
but
go ahead. So I just wanted to ask, how did you feel like, because if ChatGPT gave bullet points and Bard gave kind of like a Google right answer, so what was the difference in Claude's answer? What was it like?
Claude is like, it's much more, I think, in a creative. It's sort of, it has bullet point, but it can gave the links, and and offered quite a lot of suggestion where to go. And so sometimes I feel Claude is a bit more.
I do agree with you, because remember when I was talking about this search engine optimization, it might take you a really long time to learn about these things. And then I always wanted that I would like to have somebody next to me instead of Googling around these, and then you get 10 different kind of answers, and somebody says this and somebody says that. I would like to have an SEO expert, trained SEO expert for me, side by side, to ask these. And then this Claude feels like that. And what I was surprised is that it gave me suggestions that I didn't even ask about. So that was the biggest difference, in my opinion, when I was comparing it to ChatGPT and Bard. And I was really surprised that it was able to give these answers, like kind of like answer the question that I didn't even know to ask, if you know what I mean. So that was really, really powerful, in my opinion.
Another example that I did here was that they gave these very software the idea of creating the HTML and create a one-page portfolio website. And when they looked at the example of what ChatGPT, it's almost, you could just copy and paste the material, and it looks it's almost like, it looks as if it's been produced by a sort of code interpreter. There, it gives you the heading, footing, etc., and the various headers.
Yeah.
Whereas when they did the same, and Bing could also do this, the same, but with the HTML portion. But for example, with the other one, with Google Bard, it gave 3 different versions. But again, the answer are surprisingly looking like, it's kind of basic, but it's sort of Google type answer. But it gives you the HTML, but maybe it's not so easy to copy and paste. And then Claude's response, it does give it the same thing, but it's like the format is completely compressed. So in terms of a coding interpreter or code creator, maybe Claude is maybe not as used to it yet.
Yeah. So it seems like there is definitely pros and cons in these tools. And like I mentioned, I was just today testing this part, and I was thinking that, is it because of my prompting, and maybe I'm not using correct enough prompting? But if you had the same experience that it gives this Google-like answer, then maybe it's because it takes most of its data from Google. But it doesn't mean that it's bad. I think it's very powerful in terms of searching, like, let's say if you want to travel, it's so much better than those, Claude and ChatGPT.
One area, though, where I think ChatGPT trumps is in terms of problem solving and things like mathematical reasoning. Like, for example, I have used it in terms of looking at my son's homework, etc. In terms of explaining things, for example, that's why I think ChatGPT is very good at. It's good at giving explanation of various steps in the mathematical process. It's good at problem solving. How can I go to HB? No, but it can, in terms of kind of reasoning ability, that kind of thing.
Can you give me an example how it gave to your son's,
like
homework?
we did things like solve this equation, and that kind of thing. And it basically listed out step by step. This is ChatGPT, Claude indexes at this time, but how to solve it. It explained, do this, and not only that, but also why you need to do this. And whereas when you did at that time, it would also Google it, and the Google would just either come up with an answer or in no explanation, and or just send you to 4 different papers.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. That's really good, actually.
And but as I say, for me, though, the really is this idea that you can summarize text very quickly, and that's kind of an area where we come on to a topic we talked earlier about, this where will this head to? Because in terms of, I'm worried a bit in terms of legal or lawyers, etc., because a lot of lawyers, the way they earn their money is to summarize complex text, draw the laws, whereas now you could actually push in the whole things to ChatGPT, and then you can ask ChatGPT or even on Claude, particularly the answer. And it's the same with, I thought about preparing for exams. Like if you need to read in accounts a large number of text, you can feed them into Claude, and you can ask the question. So Claude can be like your tutor.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then we can't, then in terms of lawyers, we come back again, of course, to that ethical question, that in which time robots are going to make the decisions who goes to jail or whatever.
But also just give so instead of going to say that you have am I breaking the law or whatever, what you could do is just what is the legal text, grab the legal text, feed it all into Claude. And or even what you could do, I can imagine in the future, is that you feed all the Claude in text Claude, and then you could also feed your case, and then Claude can tell you how much chance you have or something like that.
Yeah.
The reason why I thought about that was a different example, that in terms of applying for jobs, because you could use the same thing there. You could feed your cover letter. Sorry, you can take the job description, you feed the job description into Claude, and then you feed your CV, and then you ask Claude to write the cover letter for you.
That's very good advice, actually. Yeah.
ChatGPT can do the same, but what the good thing about Claude is that it can process. So if you do the same in ChatGPT, you would have to paste the copy of your CV, then paste the job description. Whereas with Claude, you can just upload these 2 files and Claude reads from them.
Yeah. And that's very powerful. And
Claude and ChatGPT are ChatGPT, because they have so many applications and add-ons that you can use in terms of making your social media manager, make it this and this. I use, as I said before, I use something called AIPM, which has plugins. It has 3,000 plugins, and it works in collaboration with Google and Chrome, and it can do so many functions, and you can search for, do blog, do social media, and it has a plugin for it. It's a bit like, it's an app. I have an app for that. I have a plugin for that. So I would definitely recommend for small businesses. I still believe OpenAI and ChatGPT 4 is very good, but for students and other people who need to analyze, read a lot of books or summarize books or research, etc., Claude has a definite advantage for me.
Yeah, that's right. I do agree with you. Like most of the time, the ChatGPT is very good for small entrepreneurs. Maybe they want to create content or create some creative writing or something, like simple tasks or something like that, or ideas. But if you really need a long form summary of content or something, then Claude. And I must mention about the good qualities about Claude, of it giving it kind of like some of its replies seemed more creative in terms of giving you advice, giving you a real advice that you wouldn't even know to ask yourself, which was really impressive. And then Bard, on the other hand, if you need up-to-date information from internet, it's really superior to those other tools. So yeah.
Well, we could perhaps ask our listener to write in to us or follow us on Instagram, Revolution44, and on TikTok, and write in. Have you used all of these different software, and what did you use them for, and which one did you think were the best one?
Of course, because this was just our kind of like discussion around the topic and our opinions, and maybe you have a different experience or opinion, so we would love to hear.
So, well, we need to thank you very much for following us this time, and come back to see in a couple of weeks when we have our next episode.
Like, subscribe, and follow. And most importantly, share this episode with someone who might benefit from it. And let's carry on the conversation in the comments and in our website, aipodcast.online. Your feedback and insights mean a lot to us. Thanks for tuning in, and see you again in the next episode.